হেল্ল'
স্যার মোক মাতিছে
হেৰি আচ্ছা মই কেইটামান লিংক শ্বেয়াৰ কৰি দিছিলো যে সেইকেইটা মোৰ নামত ডিছপ্লে হৈ আছে হা মই ঠিক ধৰিব পৰা নাই কোন কোন আছে তাৰমানে সেই ৰেজিষ্টাৰ নকৰাকে মোৰ লিংকটো মই কপি কৰি দি
মই
দিছিলো
ফোন আপোনাক ফোন কৰিছো স্যার
আচ্ছা
সেইকাৰণে সেম নাম আহিছে স্যার বস্তুটো
তাকেতো
ৰিনেম
কি
কৰিব
কয়
দিলে হ'ল স্যার তেখেতক
ধৰিব পৰা নাই নহয় কোন কোন
তেখেতক
আছে
অলপ ৰিনেম কৰিব দিব লাগিব স্যার
কোন কোন আছে ধৰিব পৰা নাই আৰু হেৰি কৰিব লাগিব মোক কোহোষ্ট কৰি দিব লাগিব
সেইকাৰণে
এটা কোহোষ্ট কৰি দিয়া
মই কোনটো ঠিক আছে মানে আপুনি কথা কওকচোন মই ধৰিব নাই আপুনি অৰিজিনেল কোনটো স্যার
ৰ'বা, মই তোমাৰ
স্যার
এইটো মই কৈ আছো পাইছা
মই আছো জ্যোতি খাটনিয়াৰ জয়দীপে দিছে মোক
সেইটো তই হেৰি কৰিলে সেইটা নামটো চেঞ্জ কৰি দিব
আপুনি
পাৰিবি
কৈছে নে স্যার কোনটো কি জ্যোতিদাৰ কথা কৈছে আপুনি
মই জ্যোতি খাটনিয়াৰ মই কৈ আছো
পাইছো
জ্যোতি
পাইছো
খাটনিয়াৰ
চিন পাইছো
হয় আপুনি মোক ঠিক কৰি দিয়ক আৰু তেতিয়া মই ঘুটুং ঘাটাং নকৰিলেও হ'ব
মই দিছো দিয়ক
থেংক ইউ মই মিউট কৰি দিওঁ
কৈ দিয়ক স্যার আপুনি কোচ পাইছে নে
পাইছো Professor Sarvani Gupta. Madam, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. Great. Glad to see you.
Yeah. Jaideep.
Yes.
A friend of mine wants to join, but I don't think she has registered. If I give you her name, is that okay? She is Dr. Shushmita Mukherjee.
Okay. Yeah, sure. I mean, she has to click the link only.
Yeah. Okay, fine.
And
Thanks.
then she can rename herself because it will be shown your name. Sir, can you hear me? Hello, sir. Hello. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Bandhupadhyay, sir.
Yes. Ready hoise?
Ready hoise, sir. Moi heri Arun Bandhupadhyay sir kiba eta problem pai ase. Moi sir logot contact kori asu.
Okay.
Hole start kori dim.
Thik ase. Okay. No problem.
এইবিলাক মানে এই অৰুণ বন্দ্যোপাধ্যায় সোমাইছে, নিজৰ নামত সোমাইছে, তুমি চোৱাচোন। Hello, sir. Can you hear? Hello, sir. Can you hear? Yes. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I can.
Sukma, we can start.
Okay, sir.
জয়দীপ মোৰ ভিডিঅ'টো কণ্ট্ৰল কৰা শুৰু কৰিছে ৰবা। হ'ব দিয়া,
Okay.
আৰম্ভ কৰি দিয়া কিন্তু।
Okay, ঠিক আছে।
Okay, sir. আৰম্ভ কৰি দিওঁ তেতিয়াহ'লে। হয়। A very good afternoon to all our guests and participants. Marking the celebration of the 125th birth anniversary of Subhash Chandra Bose, Krishnakanta Khandikoi, State Open University, welcomes you all to this prestigious event. I, Dr. Sukmaya Lama from the Department of History, on behalf of Surya Kumar Bhuya School of Social Sciences, consider it as a privilege to organize and host this panel discussion on Rethinking Netaji, Some Reflections. Wishing you all a very warm welcome once again, I now request Professor Jayanta Sharma to briefly introduce the program to this August gathering. Professor Sharma, sir.
Respected Vice Chancellor, K.K. Hendik State Open University, Professor Kantapa Das, Dean Academic, Professor Dibyajyoti Mahanto, Registrar, Professor Arujyoti Chaudhary, Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay, Professor Sharbani Guptu, and Professor Rajiv Hendik, all my esteemed colleagues and participants. Subhash Chandra Bose has recently been introduced into Indian public sphere as an icon of our past glory. Before that, for almost 3 generations of Indians since independence, Subhash Chandra Bose had largely been the tragic hero of our story of independence. Bengal and Bengalis, not particularly in that order, have taken the lead in romanticizing, idealizing, and creating myth around the man. Critical evaluation of the persona, political philosophy, and life and times of Subhash Chandra Bose have largely escaped the public discourse. So when we were given the responsibility of celebrating 125th birth anniversary of Subhash Chandra Bose on behalf of Krishnakanta Hendik State Open University, we had a discussion among ourselves and realized that rethinking Netaji for contextualizing him for the present times would be the best possible tribute to the great man on his 125th birth anniversary. Accordingly, we had decided that within our limited resource and capacity, we would organize a series of talks and panel discussions. I'm grateful that Professor Joydeep Barua, my colleague and director of Surya Kumar Bhuya School of Social Science, had agreed to organize this panel discussion, which is the first in the series. The Indian National Army, led by Subhash Chandra Bose, had its temporary headquarters at Moirang in Manipur. We have a plan for producing a short documentary film on Moirang and Netaji. We have a program for as part of this year-long celebration to organize a poster and painting competition among school children, our learners, and people in general. It is being notified very shortly. And we are also planning to stage some street plays. And finally, a panel discussion on Netaji in Northeast perspective, which will be organized as a concluding ceremony in January 2022. We have also planned to convert all the lectures in this series into some form of text at a later date. So on behalf of this committee for celebrating 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, I welcome you all to this online panel discussion. Over to Sukmaya. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Now I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Kantapa Das, to deliver his inaugural speech.
Good afternoon to all of you. Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay, Professor Sharbani Gupta, Professor Rajiv Hendik, Director of the Surya Kumar Bhuya School of Social Sciences, my faculty members of the university, dear participants, and respected guests. It is indeed a privilege for me to inaugurate this panel discussion, which I personally consider is very relevant when the country is celebrating 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. Professor Jayanta Sharma has already elaborated the plan and course of action of the Krishnakanda Hardikar State Open University while celebrating the 125th birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And it is indeed our School of Social Sciences which has decided that we would be organizing a series of programs, including panel discussions, lectures, the preparation of a video documentary, and also other activities which we deem fit to celebrate this occasion. Now, Netaji is always a source of inspiration for many Indians, including perhaps personally me. And nevertheless, people have been trying to rethink the Netaji's position in Indian freedom struggle and Indian history, and also maybe in the international context of Second World War. I personally remember talking to Professor Purabhi Banerjee in early 1990s when I used to meet her in Moscow, when she used to visit Soviet Union initially, then later on Russia, in connection with studying the archival documents about Netaji Subhash in 1989, 1990, 1991 onwards. And she used to tell me fascinating stories about the documents and archival documents. And there are many insights and which have been later published. But as an academic institution, we feel that our university, when organizing this kind of panel discussion, we talk about rethinking Netaji on his 125th birth anniversary. And I'm very happy that today in the panel discussion, we have eminent scholars like Arun Bondopadhyay and Sarvani Gupta, and also Professor Rajiv Hendik. And I believe this will be a very intellectually stimulating discussion. It will greatly benefit our faculty members, scholars, and also general public like me who are interested to know more about Netaji. So with these few words, I formally inaugurate this panel discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. I now request Professor Joydeep Barua, Director, Surya Kumar Bhuyan School of Social Sciences, to introduce the chair and the panelists.
Good afternoon to everyone. It gives me immense pleasure in introducing our today's speaker and chair. Let me first introduce our two very eminent speakers. Firstly, I take the privilege of welcoming and introducing Professor Arun Bondopadhyay. Professor Bondopadhyay is a well-known historian who has taught and worked in the areas of economic history, environmental history, and history of science and technology of modern South Asia. He taught at Calcutta University and held the Nurul Hasan Chair Professorship at the Department of History. Currently, he is Historical and Archaeological Secretary of Asiatic Society, Kolkata. He has written and published extensively on his areas of interest. His publications include books, 4 essays on writing economic history of colonial India with Amyo Bakshi and David Voss book, Science and Society in India, Eastern India in late 19th century with Professor Amyo Bakshi in 2 volumes, Tribes, Forest and Social Formation in Indian History and Agrarian Economy of Tamil Nadu, besides several papers in leading academic journals. He will be speaking broadly on the contemporary relevance of Netaji this afternoon. I then would like to welcome and introduce Professor Sarvani Gupta. She is a professor in Asian Literary and Cultural Studies at Netaji Institute of Asian Studies, Kolkata. Previously, she worked for 2 decades in the Department of History, Calcutta Girls College. Her academic interests range from theater studies to history of nationalism and culture in colonial and post-colonial period. Her publications include interesting books, Actress in the Public Theatre of Kolkata, Music of Nationhood, Dijendralal Roy of Bengal, On Modern Indian Sensibilities, Culture, Politics and History with Isita Banerjee Dubey, and the regional great game in the Indian Ocean and Indian evolving maritime strategy with Vivek Mishra, besides numerous papers in academic journals. Professor Gupta will be broadly speaking on Netaji and Indian nationalism, in general and in particular the INA, the Indian National Army. Last but not the least, I would like to welcome and introduce our chair and moderator for today's panel, Professor Rajiv Handik. He currently heads the Department of History, Guwahati University. His areas of interest include environmental history, ethnohistory, and history of Northeast India and Southeast Asia. He is well known for his book, British Forest Policy in Assam. I'm indeed privileged and honored to have him as the chair and moderator for today's discussion. We are extremely grateful that all these eminent people have agreed to share their views and time with us this afternoon. Without further delay, I now request Professor Rajiv Handik to kindly take over and go ahead with agenda. Thank you.
Namaskar. Honorable Vice Chancellor of Krishnapal Khandikoi State Open University, Professor Kondorpo Das, respected Registrar, Professor Arup Jyoti Chaudhuri sir, Director of Surya Kumar Bhuiya School of Social Sciences, Professor Joydeep Borua, Professor Jayanta Kumar Sharma, and other esteemed faculty members, office employees, research scholars, and students of Krishnakanta Khandikoi State Open University, respected panelists for this discussion on rethinking Netaji, some reflection, Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay, who has been a very old friend of our university as a whole, and a leading academician who has been mentoring quite a few scholars from Northeast India, and Professor Sarvani Gupta, and all esteemed participants joining this online event, which is being organized as part of the celebration of 125th years of 25 years of birth anniversary of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and of course, which is going on at a national level. We feel greatly honored and privileged to chair this very important panel discussion on a personality that on any day ignites our minds and our imaginations. The life and many struggles of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, his childhood, his spiritual quest, his academic brilliance, and the subsequent outstanding results, including the one in the Indian Civil Services, where, as we all know, he stood forth, and which subsequently he resigned. You know, that was a very coveted service. His participation in India's freedom struggle, his Indian National Congress presidency, the Haripura session especially, and the Tripuri session, his incarceration, which is also very much romanticized, and the Great Escape in 1941, his many travels to Germany, and through a U-boat to Southeast Asia and thence to Japan, his leadership of the Azad Hind Force and the establishment of the Provisional Government of Free India in 1943 in Singapore, his militant struggle and his propaganda, and ultimately his departure on August 18th, 1945, in that fateful flight to Manchuria and the so-called and the crash at Taiwan. These are all, matters of considerable debate and discussion even today. Netaji represented an alternative path in the freedom struggle, where the end was same as that of Mahatma Gandhi, that is independence of India, but the means were different. There were many aspects of Netaji that are still being researched and reinterpreted. It's true, his life reflected some paradox as well. He belonged to the left and yet wanted to befriend Hitler and Tojo. His life was devoted to freeing his motherland from the yoke of colonial rule, and his patriotism and sacrifice is indeed legendary, and he is perhaps the only leader of India's freedom struggle that evokes a sense of mystery and perhaps a sort of romanticism that is unique and strong. Today we have with us two very eminent resource persons, scholars in their own right, that would contribute to this discussion on rethinking Netaji, some reflection. I congratulate all the members of the Krishnakanto Hondikoi State Open University for this venture, for this academic initiative, and would now like to call upon Professor Arun Bandopadhyay sir to make his presentation. Over to you, Professor Bandopadhyay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Please, please carry on.
Okay. So since there is some problem in my personal computer, I'm talking from my mobile. So there is
It's okay.
certain difficulty in the very beginning.
It's okay, sir. It's okay.
Let me
Please,
begin.
please.
Let me begin by saying that I'm extremely grateful to the authorities of this Open University, particularly Professor Das, who is the Vice Chancellor of this university, Professor Rajiv Handik, who is chairing this session, a long friend of mine, and Joydeep Borua, who has taken all this labor to organize this seminar, and also I think all the persons responsible for running this Center for Social Sciences so efficiently, and particularly making this occasion of Netaji's 125th birthday a subject of panel discussion. I'm grateful for this invitation of sharing some of my ideas, and also this opportunity of being in the panel of discussion. I wish to learn many things from the questions as well as from the other presentations and from the presidential comment. And as the authorities have told me to restrict myself with the contemporary relevance of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, I shall mostly do that, and I shall do it very quickly, as possible, maybe 20-25 minutes within this program. So the most important thing that actually attracts me is that this contemporary relevance of Netaji, apparently Netaji's impact, or for that matter, his contemporary relevance in modern India is too obvious to highlight. Everybody knows it apparently. First of all, he's one of the two important leaders of modern India that the 20th century has created. We know both of them, Bose and Gandhi. Secondly, he is an arch anti-imperialist, nationalist, and traditionalist as well. This is also a very important point. Thirdly, his social, economic, and political philosophy is still relevant. And fourthly, over and above all, he is a great sacrificer for the cause of the nation, a thing which can become an example for the present generation. But on a closer scrutiny, there are various issues and questions, all not valid issues and questions, but they are popularly discussed. So we cannot dismiss them, associated with an evaluation of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose in 2021. What are they? First of all, generally, we take Subhash as an antithesis of Gandhi. violence as an antithesis of non-violence as a means of the India's freedom struggle. This is the first important issue, the first important problem. The second, unlike many nationalists, Subhash Chandra Bose's anti-imperialism, nationalism, and traditionalism were basic, rooted in his early life. We shall talk about that very soon, and we shall know also that this early life can be most better understood, can be understood from his autobiography, unfinished autobiography. That is to say, that a pilgrim's yes, that is to say pilgrim's thing. And thirdly, his social, economic, and political philosophy had a history of its own. This is also a very, very important thing. And finally, his tolerance and his sacrifice were proverbial. So these are the four issues on which many discussions are actually bound. So to begin with, can you hear me? I hope so. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. So first of all, we shall go back to his early life, because we think that in his early life, which he has discussed in his unfinished autobiography, written sometimes in 1937 and covering from his birth down to 1920. This early life, he was born in a well-to-do family of Janakinath Bose and Prabhavati Bose, and his early life was spent in Cuttack. His father was a successful lawyer and a government leader, more British in habits, while mother, who was called as Ma Janoni, was devout Hindu housewife. His early education started in Protestant European school in Cuttack from 1902, when he was only 5 years old, and he was at 12. He was admitted to Ravensa. Collegiate School in Cuttack, where he started to learn at the same time Bengali and Sanskrit from 1909 onwards, and became familiar with the writings of Bankim Chandra and Vivekananda, and also was influenced by the religious ideas of Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. The headmaster of the collegiate school, whose name was Beni Madhav Das, had a permanent influence in his life. Now, after having that brilliant result in the entrance examination of Calcutta University, he stood first. He stood second in the entrance examination. Subhas came to Calcutta in 1912 and was admitted in the Presidency College. And he chose to study philosophy as a special subject, and he during this time befriended with Hemanta Kumar Sarkar. This is a very, very important name. Hemanta Kumar Sarkar, who became a lifelong friend of Subhas. And Bose and Sarkar even left home when they were actually 17 for some time in search of a religious guru. They went up to Varanasi, and there actually the guru told them that sannyas is not their actual way. So that is one part of his life, early life. And in Presidency College, you also know the famous incident of the history teacher, relating to the history teacher Oten, and Subhas's anti-racial stand in that. I am not going into the details of that. It occurred in February 1916, and though Subhas's role was not proved, Subhas was actually rusticated from the University of Calcutta and as well as from the Presidency College, and later on, with the help of the Vice Chancellor Ashutosh Mukherjee, he was admitted in the Scottish Church College, from where he actually passed his BA Honours in Philosophy in the first class in 1918. Now, after that, because of his father's liking, Subhas then went to England for the ICS examination and got admitted in the University of Cambridge, University for the Mental and Moral Science Tripos. As far as the ICS examination is concerned, he stood fourth in the examination, but very soon left it for his strong nationalistic leanings. Here I will come to a very, very important point. Why did Subhas leave this coveted, lucrative ICS examination, though his family, particularly his father, very much liked it? At that time, in 1920, Subhas wrote a letter to his elder brother, Sarath. And there he wrote 2-3 sentences. I think of them, one is very, very important and which can be used as a tool of understanding Subhas's entire life story. Subhas wrote to Sarath in 1920. But for a man of my temperament, who has been feeding on ideas that might be called eccentric, then the very, very important line, the line of least resistance is not the best line to follow. I think this is the most important message of Subhas's life throughout his career. The line of least resistance is not the best line to follow. And then he continued, the uncertainties of life are not appealing to one who has not at heart worldly ambitions. So it proves that Subhas was very much different from other nationalists. Subhas was very much anti-imperialist. Subhas was very much anti-racial by his various kinds of activities, but at the same time, he was spiritual in mind, and he always tried to follow the maxim that the line of least resistance is not the best line to follow. This happened later also in his life. The Subhas Chandra's anti-imperialism, nationalistic and traditional stand was quite apparent even before he joined nationalistic politics in 1920-21 particularly. Here came Subhas's contact with Gandhi in 1921, who actually he met Gandhi in Bombay, and Gandhi asked him to contact C.R. Das, who was at that time the most prominent political leader in Bengal at that time. Now, Subhas's first impression with Gandhi was not impressive because he thought that Gandhi was evading some of the questions, and though he maintained lifelong respect to Mahatma, Subhas's increasing popularity among the young and his involvement with the trade union activities made him more and more popular in the 1920s in the Congress politics. Then came 1938 and 1939, of which my friend Rajiv Handik has already spoken about, the Haripura and Tripura Congress, and Subhas's schism with Congress began. And here began a particular triangle, Gandhi, Subhas, Jawahar triangle. And there is a very important temptation about this triangle. We can go into the details of their differences over time, but at the same time, we should not ignore their many agreements. So we have to go through this triangle very, very carefully. Very recently, Rudrangshu Mukherjee has published one book, the letters between Nehru and Subhas, and it shows that on many occasions, Nehru was on Subhas's side against Gandhi. And with regard to Gandhi and Subhas, I shall come in more details. Here comes the question of a relation in contradiction only. And this contradiction is Nehru versus, this contradiction is Gandhi versus Bose. Should we judge Bose only from this point of contradiction, or should we go beyond that? Violence versus non-violence as a means of Indian freedom struggle. The problem is that this is not a complete explanation of a relation, and also of a part of history. That part of history cannot be completely explained only by these differences. Take, for example, Netaji's presidential address at Haripura Congress in 1938. I'm quoting one or two sentences from that. In conclusion, I shall voice your feelings by saying that all India fervently hope and prays that Mahatma Gandhi may be spared to our nation for many, many years to come. We need him for the cause of Indian independence. And more important, look, what is more, we need him for the cause of humanity. That was Haripura, 1938. You can argue that actually at that time everything was going well, but those people who are actually talking about these differences between Gandhi and Bose, or even this triangle, this Gandhi, Nehru, Bose, they are not agreeing to that. They say that actually this dissension was even earlier in the late 1920s and even 1930s. But in 38, he was saying this, not only that Gandhi was needed for the cause of Indian independence, but also for the cause of humanity. Now, a year later, even after the Tripuri rift, Subhas made a statement on 5th February 1939. This is a very important after the Tripuri rift. In this connection, Subhas is writing. Subhas is actually saying, this is a statement. I should also like to say that I have on some occasion felt constrained to differ from Mahatma Gandhi on public questions, but I yield to none in my respect for his personality. But whatever his view may be, it will always be my aim and object to try and win him his confidence, for the simple reason that it will be a tragic thing for me if I succeed in winning the confidence of other people, but fail to win the confidence of India's greatest man. Now, don't take this statement merely as a eulogistic statement of regarding Gandhi, so that, or a very strategic statement. It is not that. Subhas actually proved this. Even after the formation of the INA, Subhas Chandra Bose made a radio broadcast from Bangkok on the 75th birth anniversary of Gandhi on October 2, 1943, where he said, "The service which Mahatma Gandhi has rendered to India is so unique and unparalleled that his name will be written in letters of gold in our national history for all time." Now, indeed, Subhas named one of the INA brigades as Gandhi Brigade and another as Johar Brigade. So Subhas was not merely giving a lip service to it. Subhas was doing that. And also, it is to be remembered that Gandhi also maintained the same respect to Netaji as expressed in his speeches on 23rd January 1947 and also as on 23rd January 1948. On the latter occasion, that is to say a few days before Gandhi's own death, indeed, actually you all know that most probably that this is true also, that Gandhi asked the elder brother of Netaji, Sharad Bose, not to make any Sraddh ceremony of Netaji in 1946, around that time. Now, on 23rd January 1948, Gandhi said, "Subhas Babu was a votary of violence, and I am a votary of ahimsa. But what does it matter? I know that most important thing is that we should learn from other people's virtues. We should be like the swan and take the milk of virtue. We should emulate him in his virtues. Subhas was a great fighter. He laid down his life for the country. Let us therefore in remembering Subhas, think of his great virtues and purge our heart of malice. It is very important. He is saying our heart of malice, actually including probably his own. Now I come to the question. Subhas's social, economic, and political philosophy is to be specially discussed and analyzed. Subhas was influenced by a number of thinkers in India and abroad, such as Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Aurobindo Ghosh. Indeed, Aurobindo was a great influence on him. C.R. Das, Lenin, Mustafa Kemal Pasha, D. Valéry, Joseph Mazzini, Count Cavour, and Garibaldi. Now, Subhas had a profoundly spiritual and religious frame of mind, but his social views were above caste and creed. It was a mixture of deep national and international exposure, both in Europe and Asia. He was a God believer, and he permanently kept a copy of Bhagavad Gita in his pocket always. But his Azad Hind Fauj was above religion, comprising Hindus, Muslims, and Sikh soldiers. He also maintained complete equality with regard to women in the INA. Subhas's economic policy envisaged the concept of planning and industrialization in independent India as initiated in the Haripura Congress. The famous Bombay Plan of 1942 is a corollary of that. Here, he was greatly influenced by the Soviet success in this case. His choice was for economic development through rapid industrialization in a short time, which is very, very important even today. Now, Subhas's political philosophy was a product of the time and was always changing. It can be analyzed from the angles of spiritualistic, nationalistic, socialistic, secularistic, democratic, and socialistic characteristic. No place to discuss them at length at this moment. Although Subhas wanted a political system, a state of an authoritarian character in place of the so-called democratic system, his state will work as an organ or as the servant of the masses, the servant of the people. In his final analysis, the supremacy of the people is the source of authority. Many myths have been created over this point, and vis-a-vis the views of Gandhi and Nehru on this. One analyst, Robert Bock by name, called it a paradigmatic rift of the one connected with the Jefferson-Hamilton myth in the US history in the 1790s, in the developing story of modern India in the 20th century. Now I will come to the last point of my brief presentation, Netaji's legacy. It is high time that the glorious legacy of Netaji is to be found in several contexts. In the context of his time, in relation to the various aspects of India's freedom struggle and development journeys, and of course, beyond time also. I shall not end with any definitive conclusion on each of them, while highly appreciating his ideas and activities in each of these fields. I shall rather end with an idea of open-endedness as shown in the fag end of a popular Bengali and Hindi film, Gumname. I am not actually subscribing to the other theses, that is to say, Netaji's afterlife, that is to say, Netaji as Gumname, not that. But for long, it was hard to believe that Netaji passed away in August 1945. For many people in India did not believe that, actually. However, the situation has changed remarkably with the passage of time, 125 years. It has now been important to resurrect and re-evaluate the ideas of Netaji, not that Netaji in flesh and blood, but the ideas of Netaji that stood for and sacrificed a brilliant career instead. Probably Herein lies the contemporary relevance of Netaji. That is to say, Netaji's ideals that would have greater importance even after his quote-unquote death. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Bandyopadhyay. You have actually very rightly flagged off all the important issues relating to the contemporary relevance, and you have also flagged actually some of the issues which have sort of taken some amount of controversial character, like the Gumnami Baba theory. And you are absolutely right in saying that it's time to talk not of the afterlife of Netaji, but about his ideas, about his philosophy, and maybe about many other aspects which are very, very relevant to us today. Thank you very much once again, Professor Bandyopadhyay. Now, I would like to request our other panelist, another very renowned scholar, Professor Sarvani Gupta, to make her presentation. So after that, we will go for the question answer session and maybe some more discussion on the issue. So over to you, Professor Gupta.
Thank you, Chairperson, Dr. Rajiv Handik. Thank you to the organizers for asking me to speak today. I am not really a Netaji scholar, but having been associated with the Netaji Research Bureau for many, many years and now working at the Netaji Institute for Asian Studies, a lot has obviously come into my horizon, you know, and makes you think. And I'm very, very honored to also share this panel with my teacher, Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay, who has already given such a fantastic overview, and one which is so relevant, so necessary, and so significant today. So it will be much easier for me to carry on from there, since I'm not going to really deal with Netaji as such, but on how his inspiration has worked with his followers. So I am looking at an alternative experiment for unity and freedom. I must also thank Dr. Joydeep Borua for helping me with the PowerPoint, showing the PowerPoint. The Indian freedom movement was enriched by the thoughts and ideas of a number of individuals who wanted to explore various paths and possibilities for a way to independence. Whenever it seemed that the road ahead was blocked by imperialist powers, a new path was charted. And when an individual was silenced, many more became vocal. One such voice was that of Subhash Chandra Bose and the Azad Hind Fauj, a unique movement which was armed with militaristic discipline and idealistic fervor. It was an alternative experiment to move for independence from outside at a time when the country was in turmoil, troubled by deep-seated religious and social problems. Now, in retrospect, one judges the Azad Hind movement as a military failure, yet its political success has also been acknowledged by all. My plan today is to trace the ideas that created this deeply embedded nationalistic sense, which went beyond the boundaries of territory, race, religion, community, and caste. The charismatic leadership of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose became an inspiration for the members of the INA, as seen from the different writings and memoirs of the INA community, which is the main source of my source material for this paper. I hope to trace the thoughts and ideas of these patriots. Joydeep, can you wait till I ask you to change the, yeah, just leave it there, yeah. I hope to trace the thoughts and ideas of these patriots, many of whom belong to the minority Muslim community, and see how, despite linguistic, religious, and caste differences, these men and women strove to live up to Netaji's ideal of creating a truly national army. The military failure of the Azad Hind Fauj may have temporarily discredited the movement, but the long-term significance of the experiment manifested itself immediately afterwards, when the whole country rallied around the three people who were convicted in the INA trials in 1946. On the eve of the 75th anniversary of our independence next year, it is time now to reevaluate their contribution in its wider perspective. The Azad Hind Fauj had men from different communities and women, of course, and castes, and from their writings, one thing shines clearly. It is their pride in being an Indian. The firm and resolute awareness of a common identity in a land so far away from India was undoubtedly due to their deep respect for their leader, to whom divisiveness of communal politics was an absolute anathema. But to me, what is most important is that in all these men, they felt their magnetism, they were inspired by his ideals, they were respectful of his decisions and opinions, admired his personality, yet their loyalty came not from any blind belief for dogma or even any spiritual faith, but with a clear and conscious mind. They wrote down in their memoirs repeatedly of the uniqueness of their experience in the INA, and their appreciation of their leader's vision and of their own dedication to the cause of India. Not a Muslim India, not a Sikh India, not a high caste India, not even India of Harijans. They were fighting for the freedom of the motherland, marching for a Qaum. They were the lion hearts who would not hesitate to lay down their lives for the nation, Hind. When in 1946, a trial was held at the Red Fort against the surviving Indian National Army personnel on charges of treason, Shah Nawaz Khan, Gurbaksh Singh Dhillon, Prem Kumar Sehgal, a Muslim, a Sikh, and Hindu officers, became a symbol of national unity and patriotism above religious sectarianism. Professor Sugata Bose, in his definitive biography of His Majesty's opponent on Netaji, has started his book with this trial. As INA officers, they were also a symbol of the struggle of the Indians against British colonialism and its attempt to destroy the social fabric of coexistence of different communities, which had been traditionally the way of living for Indians. The symbolism became even more significant at a time when the course of the freedom struggle was facing serious disruption due to the rise of Hindu-Muslim communalism in the 1940s. This was not merely an awareness of the difference, but a growth of arrogance, which denies space and is intolerant of an alternative vision. So Netaji's alternative ideal that flowed into the country from outside filled the Indians with hope and optimism. As Lakshmi Sehgal of the Rani of Jhansi Regiment wrote in her diary on 10th December 1943, face to face with the freedom objective, communalism will find its death. Through harmonious coexistence, cutting across barriers of religion and caste still remains an elusive dream in India. At the time, Netaji showed the way how communalism could be given an ignorable burial. Can I have the next slide, please? The formation of the Indian National Army preceded the arrival of Subhash Chandra Bose. It was formed under the inspiration of Rashbihari Bose in 1941 among the Indian soldiers and Indian civilians in the Japanese occupied areas under the protection and support of the Japanese government to organize a movement to liberate India from British rule. They also connected with different revolutionary Indian leaders and organized branches of Indian Independence League. Soon, Captain Mohan Singh of the 14th Punjab Regiment joined hands in organizing the captured Indian soldiers into a national army to wage a struggle against the British in Malaya, Hong Kong, and Singapore. In 1942 February, their ranks were increased when Colonel Hunt, on behalf of the Indian High Command in Singapore, handed over Indian prisoners of war to Major Fujiwara of the Japanese Army, who in turn handed them over to Captain Mohan Singh. It was from this point onwards, according to historian Peter Fay in his book, The Forgotten Army, that the INA, unlike the Indian Army, deprived of its British officers by a surgical stroke, became in that instant wholly Indian in composition. The third phase was when there was a temporary dissolution of the INA after Mohan Singh's arrest by the Japanese, despite the reluctance of many officers to disband the INA. Can we have the next slide? The final phase was when it was resurrected by Rashbihari Bose, who then handed over the command to Subhash Chandra Bose, who at the request of INA undertook a perilous journey by sea from Germany. I'm going to concentrate on this phase under the supreme commandership of Netaji, of Subhash Chandra from 4th July 1943 onwards. Next slide. On 21st October 1943, Netaji formed the provisional government of Azad Hind to launch and conduct the struggle that, in Netaji's words, would bring about the final emancipation of Asia by expelling the British and their allies from the Indian soil. Subhash Bose believed that freedom had to come from our own efforts. He said that we would have to pay with our own liberty. We have to pay for our own liberty with our own blood. Because when freedom is won with our own sacrifice and exertions, it can be preserved with our own strength. The British government, to maintain their imperialism, always spoke about India's pluralism as a hindrance to achieving freedom. Yet Subhash in 1943 said that in my national movement, the religious question does not exist. I have followers among all Indians, in particular among the Mohammedans, who, according to the British, pursue separatist aims. Next slide. In the INA and the provisional government, there were men and women from different communities, particularly Muslims. Peter Fay points out that Subhash made a deliberate effort to have Muslims around him and to place them well. It is true that even before him, Mohan Singh's INA, there were many Muslim officers. Actually, in the British Indian Army itself, there were many Muslim officers, but a discomfort did exist that is testified to both by Muhammad Zaman Kiani and Abid Hassan. Kiani writes that under Mohan Singh, the Muslim officers were particularly suspect, as despite a sort of camaraderie brought about by regimental life, there was no love lost between Sikhs and Muslims. Kiani actually did not like the stark dictatorship, what he called the stark dictatorship of Mohan Singh. But Shahnawaz, on the other hand, testifies that Mohan Singh too believed in secularism and said that we are Indians first and Indians last. We do not recognize any differences of caste, creed, or religion. Shahnawaz actually called a meeting of the Muslims at a mosque and asked them to join the INA voluntarily and got them to sign a dua khair, a religious confirmation of the decisions taken. Under Bose's leadership in the INA, Subhash Bose's leadership of the INA, key positions were occupied by Muslims. The first field, I'm only naming a few, there are lots. The first field force regiment with 3 battalions were under Lieutenant Colonel S.M. Hussain. Second Guerrilla Regiment with 3 battalions was under Lieutenant Colonel I.J. Kiani. 4th Nehru Regiment was under Lieutenant Colonel R.M. Arshad. Intelligence Group was under Lieutenant Colonel Shaukat Malik. Reinforcement Group to receive all Indians, to train them, re-educate them, and prepare them to fight against the British was under Lieutenant Colonel Tajamul Hussain. Only 2 key positions were under non-Muslims. This was 3rd Azad Guerrilla Regiment under Lieutenant Colonel Gulzara Singh and Rani of Jhansi Regiment under Dr. Lakshmi Sehgal. One of the 6 major formations, of the 6 major formations, 5 were under Muslim officers, and the army itself was under the command of Muhammad Zaman Kiani. In the provisional government also, established on 21st October, headed by Subhash Chandra Bose, who was the head of state and prime minister, the ministerial ranks had many Muslims. One important person was Shaukat Malik, who was chosen. Besides, there were also many advisors, amongst whom there were Muslims like Abid Hassan, who was the person who followed him on the journey to the east, and also Habibur Rahman, as you all know, who was chosen amongst the many officers to accompany on his last voyage. Shaukat Malik, who was chosen to be the one to unfurl the first flag at Moirang near Imphal, and Mehboob Ahmed, who was the youngest officer. Besides, of course, there were a large number of Sikhs who had already played, who were, according to the British, belonging to the martial race and therefore were in the British Indian Army. They, of course, joined. They were an important part of the INA. Next slide, please. Once Netaji formed the provisional government, he had to have many symbols, but interestingly enough, many of these symbols were based on secularism and were non-sectarian as well. I cannot obviously discuss all of them, but I'll just mention 1 or 2 as symbols of a state. Any state includes the the passing of stamps or currency. These were the INA stamp, the currency. There was also an INA bank. I'll show you later on, there were others as well. There was a flag which had the national colors along with the charkha. This Azad Hind with the leaping tiger, springing tiger, according to Peter Fay, and later also discussed by Subhato Bose. This was part of the Tipu Sultan legacy, who also had the springing tiger as a part of his icon. And these were chosen by the INA in order to maintain a kind of a non-sectarian base. He also had other symbols, which was the INA radio. The radio played a very important part in his government, because for India to communicate with Indians, though it was not publicly allowed, but there were a lot of these secret ham radios through which the voice of Netaji came into India as well. There were other symbols also, I'll show you, but here I want to talk about this symbol, the national anthem. Every country has their own national anthem. So the government, the provisional government that Netaji decided to have a national anthem. So first of all, it was the proposal was given that maybe Vande Mataram should be the national anthem. But Vande Mataram has, it was of course the most popular patriotic song. It was also a very popular slogan. So it would have been quite a fitting national anthem, but to be sung in chorus, any anthem is generally sung in chorus. Vande Mataram makes it a very difficult song to sing. So Janagana Mana was decided that should be the chosen song. But why then did he change? That is, he now from the time of the Haripura Congress, he had been proposing that there should be a national language, and that national language, according to him, cannot be English, because he was very vehemently anti-colonial. So it cannot be English, though the majority people in India did speak in English, and the proceedings in the Congress were in English. But he did not want the INA to choose that as the language. So the other option would be Hindi. Hindi, which has a long history and a long literature, tradition of literature, was also spoken by a large majority in northern India. But the South Indians were very against it, and the Devanagari script that was also in 1941 opposed against by Jinnah. So in 1938, I think. So then he thought, so from the Haripura Congress, he was suggesting Hindustani. Hindustani did not have a script, and that, according to him, was a plus point, because then there was no tradition behind it. It had a mixture of Hindi and Urdu. It was spoken by both Hindus and Muslims. And so Netaji actually favored introducing many Urdu words in the language that he used, which is why the INA watchwords, the catchwords, unity, faith, and sacrifice were Ittifaq, Idmat, and Qurbani. So the national anthem was a change, a Hindustani version. So I will, for your interest, I will just do the first verse of the song. It is very similar to the Janagana Mana, but slightly different as well. शुभ सुख चैन की बरखा बरसे भारत भाग है जागा पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा चंचल सागर विंध्य हिमालय नीला यमुना गंगा तेरे ही नित गुण गाए तुझसे जीवन पाए सब तन पाए आशा सूरज बनकर जग पर चमके भारत नाम सुहागा जय हो जय हो जय हो जय 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 हो भारत नाम सुहागा. And at the end, the words that are used are Bharat Bhagya Hai Jaga. So can we have the next slide? Along with these symbols, there were two very important symbols which showed there was of course also the territory, an important part of any, not the essential part, but an important part of establishing any national government is the territory. And for that, the Japanese had handed over, in writing at least, had handed over the Andaman Islands. And in His Majesty's opponent, Professor Bose has discussed this, how actually only the de jure control had been given. The de facto control was still in the hands of the Japanese. But for Netaji, it had a very symbolic importance, because from the beginning of the 20th century, all revolutionaries, all patriotic people had been imprisoned there. So when he came to visit Andaman Islands and named them Shaheed, meaning the patriots, the people who had sacrificed their lives, and Swaraj, this symbolism was important to him. The other important thing, which very important for the establishment of communal harmony, which all the authors write, all the lieutenants of all the soldiers of the INA write about, is commensality, that is eating together, about common kitchens, and of course the songs that were written, which provided inspiration for working together. Can we have the next slide? Throughout his political career within India and outside, Bose made an attempt to keep politics separate from religion. Now, this is a question of secularism. When we say something is secular, generally we mean that religion, it's kind of that person, a person, if he's secular, doesn't believe in God. But Netaji was not someone like that. For him, there was just a division, a divorce between politics and religion. He made an attempt to keep separate politics and religion. This was a great source of inspiration to his followers. Since Subhash never gave commands of secularism, the successful implementation of communal harmony and peaceful coexistence came spontaneously to his followers. Captain Lakshmi says that Netaji believed in not emphasizing Hindu-Muslim unity, but simply ignoring it. This was the only way that the vexed problem could be solved. But as S.A. Iyer wrote, Netaji's faith in God was something unique. Professor Bandyopadhyay also referred to this, how for Netaji, religion, not just religion, but his faith in a large number of thinkers was very important. He never spoke in public about God or religion, but every moment of his waking hours, he lived his God. This inspired awe and respect among his followers. Abid Hassan wrote that Netaji divorced religion completely from nationalism. Though a deeply religious man, he would not permit any public display of any religious practice. Abid Hassan actually talks about this very interesting incident, which I must share with you, where all these, once they had all started eating together, all the soldiers decided that why should we then go and worship at different places? So Netaji's rule was that everyone can go and pray on their own, in their own rooms. But if they wanted to pray together, then they have to go and pray at a specific area where you can have your congregation, but not in public. So when they are eating together, the soldiers thought, then why shouldn't we pray together? So they all sat down and wrote a prayer in which they referred to God by not any name, by not Allah or any Sikh God or any Hindu gods, but called him Malik. And they were very pleased with the poem, the prayer that they wrote. And then they went to Netaji and recited it, thinking that he would be very pleased at this effort. He didn't say anything to them in public, but he took Abid Hassan alone and really shouted at him, saying that this was a stunt that he had played and he did not appreciate it at all. What he said is something very, very important and something that we must remember. He said that if you use religion, if religion is used to unite today, the door is left open for someone to attempt to divide using the same sentiment. Let each go there and pray as much as he wants, but when you are all together, you shall cherish and nurture only national sentiments and no other. Abid Hassan said that for Netaji, the basic cause of communal disharmony was inequitable distribution of employment and wealth. So this could be, so communal harmony, according to him, could be removed by removing this by a proper distribution of the available wealth. Now, the INA got a lot of donations. In fact, the whole army used to literally run on donations of all types from everyone. And so whenever they had a lot of money, when they got a lot of donation, they used to eat very well. And when they didn't have any money, everybody from the simplest soldier, the smallest soldier to the supreme commander had very little to eat. And the Spartan way of life did not cause any discontent because of the equity of distribution of burden. Allocation of responsibility of positions also was because of this. There was absolutely no annoyance or no anger at this. Now, another important point of communal disharmony is the fact that minorities generally feel that the best positions, the best employments are reserved for the majority. So the best way to remove this, according to Netaji, was to give the minority communities an important position in his government and in his army. And for them, it was a challenge, because then they would have to, and this was also very practically shown also in the memoirs of these writers, because they say that, in fact, Kiani points out that whenever he made a suggestion, even regarding the important issue of whether or not the INA would enter Imphal, enter India through Imphal, Bose actually wanted to enter from the Arakans into Chittagong. But Kiani said that no, this was a better option, and Bose accepted it. So even in these decisions, he was not dogmatic. Netaji was also very careful that in no way should this national ideology, not just religion, but in no way should it be tainted. There is another story that Abid Hassan talks about, that the Chettiars of Singapore were the most powerful and rich people, and they were huge donations. They used to give huge donations to the INA. So once they invited Netaji for the Dasera celebrations, but Subhas said that I will not go because you don't allow, forget about other religious communities, you don't even allow lower caste Hindus to enter your temple. I cannot enter your temple. So everyone was aghast that, Netaji, why did you do this? Because we won't get the donations anymore. But strangely enough, the next day, the Chettiars invited over anybody from the INA to join Netaji in their celebrations. And Netaji in his speech there said, I have always denied that there is communalism among the Indian masses, and we all belong to an indivisible community. Abid Hassan also points out that in the army, the old British myth of the martial and the non-martial races, this divide also was completely removed, because in the INA, there were huge members from the non-martial races like the Bengalis, South Indians, Bengalis including Bihar and Orissa, of course, who were actually not a very important part of the British Indian Army, and as well as the so-called martial races. Cynical detractors might point out that such an ideal of harmonious coexistence, so successful in the insulated surroundings of Southeast Asia, would not have survived for long in the Indian subcontinent. Communal harmony and unity had been preached in India from the beginning of the freedom movement, but it had not been successful. So how could Bose's blueprint expect to work in a place where separatist tendencies were at its height? But as I just pointed out, that Bose had actually pointed out the clues by which this disharmony could be removed. It might be simply a fruitless exercise to talk about what might have happened, but the point is that this vision that Subhash had created hope at that time by showing us can be actually followed now, even today, and that is really the relevance of the INA movement. The new identity of being an Indian for all members of the Azad Hind Fauj gave them strength and courage at a difficult time then, and it can give us strength and courage today as well. As Abid Hassan wrote, till they joined the INA, we were a part of the herd. herd meaning the army, British Indian Army, but now we became individuals. The interest of everyone among us being to securely establish this identity. It is very important for Indians today to know our identity as Indians. It's far more important, it should, if we follow the teachings of Subhash Bose, the national identity must supersede all the other identities, which are equally important, but the national identity must supersede. That was the achievement of the INA experiment. And as Professor Bandopadhyay did, we have to bring in Mahatma Gandhi's role, appreciation of the INA movement, and I will end with that. He summed up in Harijan in 1946, 14th April, though the INA failed in their immediate objective, they have a great lot to their credit, of which they might well be proud. Greatest among these was to gather together under one banner men from all religions or races of India, and to infuse into them the spirit of solidarity and oneness, to the utter exclusion of all communal or parochial sentiments. It is an example which we should all emulate. And if we today only get hung up over whether Netaji is dead or alive, or whether he had an afterlife, whether Gandhi and Netaji only fought amongst each other, Netaji came to pay his homage to, Gandhi came to pay his homage to Netaji at the Netaji Research Bureau, the picture that you are seeing. Look at all the leaders who were present at the INA trials. The whole country rose up in their favor, and ultimately, according to most historians, that is the reason, and combined with the naval revolt, which is why we got our independence. So today, that Netaji's ideals, visions, and the ones that were followed by his followers is still relevant, there is no doubt. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Sobharane Gupta. It was indeed a very, very, I should say, very illuminating lecture. You had highlighted so many, important aspects of Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose, and especially you have highlighted the very inclusive and his nationalism, which was so very inclusive and non-sectarian, and which actually helped, to tie up the diversity within the prisoners of war into a very important fighting unit. And really like the singing of the national anthem in a different way, of course. Your singing is really very good. I appreciate all of that. But I won't go, I won't highlight anything of the presentation that Professor Gupta did, because indeed it was very, very, she was very clear. She was very clear in all her arguments, and there was the PowerPoint with all the very nicely depicted pictures to enjoy the presentation. So thank you very much. And after these two very, very illuminating lectures from both Professor Arun Bandopadhyay and Professor Sobharane Gupta, I would like to open up the session for the question answer. There will be a short, a very brief, I should say, question answer session. And in this, Dr. Sukmaya Lama will help us out. I hope Sukmaya is there.
Yes, sir.
And there are already quite a few, I think, questions in the chat box. Can you please, start the discussion? Yeah, over to you, Sukmaya.
Thank you, sir. So I'm audible to you?
Yeah, you are audible.
So yes, there have been a few questions here in the chat box, and I'll select 2 or 3. And the first I would love to highlight is one sent by Bhaskar Bhattacharya, faculty from Krishnagata and State Open University. And he here mentions that he's talking about Bandopadhyay sir's lecture, and he writes, I agree fully with the speaker, sir, that Bose's ideals are still relevant today in the heart of Indians. But the other aspect, what I think, is that his philosophy, basically the spirit of action or activism for people of us, which Gita nourished, is Loka Samgraha, that is the welfare of all. So he is asking about, he's looking for an answer regarding the philosophical aspect when it comes to talking about Bose. So probably this question is to Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay, sir.
Yes, this philosophical aspect is very important. And I think that if you go through the two important books that Netaji wrote during his lifetime, one is An Indian Pilgrim, an unfinished autobiography, which was published later on, and another is An Indian Struggle, 1920, 1942. As far as the second one is concerned, it is more or less the political developments of India at that time. But as far as the first one is concerned, you will find very many nuances of it. And I think that we should, this is a very important thing, that the philosophical root of Netaji has to be studied far more deeply than it has been done. For example, the relationship between his friend, him and his friend Sarkar. Sarkar was also a secretary of C.R. Das, but they had a lifelong relations. And there we find that this philosophical relation actually went on for long. And indeed, Sarkar wrote the first biography of Netaji during his lifetime. And there you will find that Netaji's longing for various spiritual issues actually remained with him till he is the most active period of his life, that is to say the INA days. So this, if someone can bridge up the early experience, the early spiritual experience of Netaji, and the most heroic and active experience of Netaji's leadership during the INA days, there may be a linkage. I cannot tell you at this moment, cannot elaborate this linkage. I think that more research is to be done on this, the philosophical roots of Netaji's activism.
Thank you, sir. There is another question posted to you. This is by Arman Hazarika, research scholar. And he has written here that, sir, as we generally see Gandhiji and Netaji to be on opposite poles as far as the means of freedom struggle was concerned, in the same way, can we say that their approach on economic reforms was also on different planes? While Gandhiji emphasized more on Swaraj through strengthening rural India, Netaji was more keen on rapid industrialization slash urbanization. So he wants to know about the differences regarding the economic.
It's a very interesting question in the sense that indeed Gandhi and Netaji differed on economic issues, as did Gandhi and Nehru also, to an extent. Gandhi's and Netaji's this elaborate planning scheme that he initiated in the Haripura time of the Congress, and which more or less culminated 4 years later in the Bombay Plan of 1942, is very, very important. And more important is this, that he was taking more and more the Soviet example of the immediate development, industrial development within a short time, how it can be done. That was actually Netaji's motto, and that is also not only a thing of the past, but also a thing of the present, because that is also the main problem of today, how the development can be done within a very short time, because actually human life is very short and also is full of uncertainties. So this development has to be seen, has to be felt, has to be heard, otherwise it cannot be done. And here I will also look through another question that actually I got it there, that is to say that regarding the means, that debate, that question of this violence and non-violence as a means of India's independence? I think to an extent it is an age-old question, and it is not progressing much, because I will see it as the debate of the time. Indeed, we have taken only Gandhi and Netaji here. Why should I not take Gandhi, Tagore, and Netaji? I will give you one example. When Netaji was returning from England by the ship, Tagore was also returning, 1921. And at that time, non-cooperation movement had started, and Tagore had not, Tagore actually has certain disagreement with this. And at that time, Subhas thought that Gandhi was right. You know that there is very, very interesting thing, but when he met him in Bombay, he had certain misgivings. So the question that there are certain very important questions of the time, and those questions were not related only with two persons. These questions are very, very important in those times. And indeed, it may be argued, I am not sure, it may be argued that the violent or non-violent method of any action can be appropriate according to the situation, because in many situations a non-violent agitation can be sustained, but in another situation a violent protest would be more fruitful. So that is actually very, very important. So by dividing the Indian freedom movement only through violent or non-violent means is not a very right question and right perspective also, I think so. Indeed, the time suggests that both means have been used from time to time. Even in Gandhian quit India movement, more violence has been used than in non-cooperation.
Thank you so much, sir. The next question is addressed to Ma'am Sharvani Gupta, and it's by Abhijit Bhuya, who has written here. The esteemed prisoner of wars handed over by the Imperial Japanese government to Netaji actually owed their allegiance originally to the British colonial government, as they were captured as members of the British Indian Army. And as such, could you kindly throw light on how Netaji was able to subsequently mobilize them so well so as to constitute the INA later to wage a war against the British Imperial government itself?
Yes, this is a very crucial point. Very good question that you've raised. This transformation is what is actually makes the INA so unique. And this contradiction, if you read The Glass Palace by Amitav Ghosh, you will find this, because when they are fighting on the field, fighting brother against brother, because there are Indians on both sides. But the whole point of this was a plan, basically, much before Netaji. This was a plan, that this was an already ready-made army that was already present there, because they were the best soldiers. But the whole point is Netaji's INA was not only a very small prisoners of war. They were the initial core, but they were added, some 20,000 or much more, maybe perhaps, were added later on by giving a call for joining the army. So ordinary civilians, many also joined in the army. They were trained, and among the many people that many departments that I mentioned, there was one particular department where these soldiers were received as, some of them prisoners of war. They were received where they were re-educated to change loyalties and to train, and all the civilians also received training. So it was a mixture of civilian and the whole point of bringing in women, that was absolutely a unique feature of the INA. And they were, of course, there was no question of them being a part of the army. They were all new recruits, and they were trained. So they were trained in martial, to fight. So even for women's empowerment, the INA played a very important role. I hope that answers you. I don't know if that's what you wanted to do.
Thank you, ma'am. I suppose he got the answer. There is another one by Shamal Ray, who wants to know probably about Netaji's life, his personal life, his family life, in Germany. And he thinks that if that could have been discussed a little bit, or a little bit of light could be thrown on this aspect of his personal life for them.
So is this for Professor Bandyopadhyay? I presume he has talked about Netaji.
Yes, probably, yes.
No, the personal, I will not be able much to say about the personal life of Netaji in Germany. But the fact is that there is a general discussion regarding and I think that this can be related. This question can be related with the international scenario. How Netaji has used the international scenario in his favor, and from that point of view, we can discuss his presence, his deliberations, his negotiations with the party in power at that time in Germany. And we cannot say in that sense that he, while doing this, he was actually subscribing to all those views of that regime. So that much I can say. But the fact is this, that he was utilizing the international situation in his favor. And for that, he has done whatever he thought was to be done.
Thank you, sir. Anvesha Hazarika just raised her hand. Anvesha, do you have any question for our panelists?
Can I think the question might also have been about Emily Schenkel. I don't know if that is what that person who was asking the question wanted to know. Yes, Emily Schenkel was the person who actually took down his Indian, either the Indian Pilgrim or the other book. She was actually engaged as a secretary to write down these books. So they, from the beginning, I suppose, shared a very interesting, what should I say, exchange of ideas. And there is recently, but I don't know if an English translation has come out, a book on Emily and Subhash. So it has come out from Netaji Research Bureau. So if you are really interested, that would be a very interesting book where the entire relationship has been discussed.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, ma'am. I guess we will conclude the discussion session here. I request Professor.
Okay. Thank you very much, Sukmaya, for assisting in collating the questions. These are very, very interesting questions, of course, and even the personal life finally came up about. It said that there is a marriage with Emily, which was done on it happened on 26 December 1937, and we all very know that they have a daughter. Subhash Chandra Bose's daughter, Anita Bose, who was a professor actually at a university at Augsburg, and who visited Kolkata during the celebrations. So it has been a very, very holistic exercise, and I must appreciate the huge range of topics that the learned research scholars, I mean to say the resource persons, have brought into it. And it's true that under the polarized atmosphere of today, especially in India, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose also has been looked upon from the lenses of today, where we find that there is a constant debate as to India won independence because of Subhash Chandra Bose, or it was without him. So I mean to say, it is something that it is being very, very extensively talked about. The contribution of Azad Hind Fauj for the independence. But we must remember one thing, that it contributed to a large extent, and we must remember that Subhash Chandra Bose, in a broadcast on Azad Hind Radio addressed to Gandhiji, he actually addressed it to Gandhi, saying that it was in 1944. India's last war of independence has begun, father of the nation. In this holy war of India's liberation, we ask for your blessing and good wishes. So apparently, we see this acceptance of Mahatma Gandhi as the father of the nation, as Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay very, very rightly said that, even with Nehru, there were a lot of convergences. We think of more of divergences, but I think there were more of convergences. There were more, acceptability of this stand on both sides, and that leads also to the conspiracy theory under different, atmosphere, where it is said that Netaji's afterlife is being, taken into account. It is said that he survived and was living in USSR, a victim of Congress politics, especially of Nehru, who did not want him back in India, as he will become one of the challengers to his power, things like that, and finally ending up with the, Gumnami Baba theory. So all this is there, but for academics, for people in the academia, we need to actually focus in this very, very auspicious 125th year of the birth of this great son of India, a great patriot, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. We should actually focus on his ideas, his philosophy, and on aspects which will help us, his patriotism, all of this. And also, I think there is something that there need to be a relook at that, the way he internationalized India's freedom struggle, his contribution to the internationalization of the entire freedom struggle. And Professor Gupta has rightly brought up about, in answering one of the questions, how there was some amount of political training, how soldiers used to be trained, that is very important. And one thing I think, I will end with this, we need to look also into the angle of propaganda, because this is a very unique situation. He had a government he had declared a government of free India. He had an army with him, and that army from outside was coming to liberate the country. We don't know, it might have also, in a way infused, that sense of patriotism also amongst the Navy soldiers, and it led to the Royal Indian Navy mutiny. We don't know about that. But, his propaganda, in fact, is something. The way the radio, he used the radio a great deal. And I'm telling you one personal anecdote. I come from a town, it's called Dibrugarh, in the eastern part of Assam. My father, he was alive when this Quit India movement was going on. He was in his teens, and there used to be Japanese bombers, Japanese planes that used to come, and they used to, in a way, broadcast. They used to throw from their plane small pamphlets with Netaji's different, he used to give messages, and Japanese planes used to come and drop them at different places. I think that was done with a view to make the people aware that there is an army which is coming to liberate them. And actually, people looked with a lot of hope, not only to the Indian National Congress, they were also looking to the Azad Hind Fauj, especially in this eastern part of India, where the allies and the powers were at very close quarters fighting together. And we all know that Netaji's army could come till Moirang. So these are issues, these are very, very interesting issues. I think some research into these aspects I have been trying to find, because my father himself had collected quite a few of them. But then in the 1950s, when the flood was very high, it all got spoiled, or it all got destroyed. Maybe he did not understand the historical significance of those. But maybe we need to look at this aspect also, where propaganda, in a way, was resorted to under the leadership of Netaji, in a way that people were influenced by him, and people were ready to welcome the Azad Hind Force, and he, as he said in his last words, which is said to his ADC, the most, you can say, the personal assistants, Colonel Habibur Rahman Khan, that, he died, but then he hoped that India will be free very soon. And that happened, of course, but there are lots of ifs and buts. Had Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose had been alive at the time of independence, perhaps India would have been very, very different, that we all can say. And with those words, and with these words, I again thank the panelists for their very, very illuminating lecture, for giving us so much of information. And I think this exercise of the Krishnakanta Handikoi State Open University has become successful because of your inputs, and also because of the participation and the very, very important questions have been put by them. I thank the authorities of Krishnakanta Handikoi State Open University under the leadership of the very able Vice Chancellor, Professor Kondorpa Das, and all the members of faculty. I thank you for giving me this opportunity to chair over this important discussion on this relevant topic on Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And really, we need to rethink Netaji in the days to come. With this, I conclude my part of the presentation, and thank you very much. I think according to the agenda, there is a formal vote of thanks by Dr. P.T. Salila Raskwa. He says from the Department of History. Of course, Sukhmaya Lama is also from the Department of History. This I am saying because I belong to history. Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay also belongs to history. Thank you very much. Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, respected invited speakers, respected chairpersons, directors of different schools of the university, senior officials, and my dear esteemed colleagues, and all the participants. Now we are at the end of this program. It's my privilege to offer my vote of thanks on this occasion. First of all, I would like to offer my sincere gratitude to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Kondorpa Das, for his both academic and moral support and inaugurating this panel. Thank you very much, sir. I really want to express my sincere gratitude on behalf of Pujya Kumar Bhuiyan School of Social Sciences and entire family of Krishnakanta Handikoi to our invited speaker, Professor Arun Bandyopadhyay, for accepting our invitation and to be here and give this wonderful and enlightened speech. Thank you very much, sir. Wish you good health. My heartfelt thanks goes to our another invited speaker, Shravani Gupta, for being present here and making this panel exceptionally fruitful and inspiring one. Really, if it was in normal days, of course, it would have been wonderful to meet you both in person. I hope maybe in future, it could really be happen. Thank you, madam. I would like to offer my gratitude to our chairperson, Professor Rajiv Handikoi, for moderating this panel. Actually, sir is always kind enough to us, and in future also, I hope he will be with us. Thank you very much, sir. My sincere thanks goes to our IT cell for their technical support to organize this program. Then I finally thank all the participants for your presence and making this panel successful. Once again, I would like to thank everybody present here. Thank you very much. With this, I have the privilege to announce the panelists. Thank you.